Hey, John, are you there?
I am indeed here, George.
Ah, great. Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, and yeah, I'm recording. Are you recording on that end?
I am.
Okay, good. Yeah, things are good here. We're in a cold spell. It's it's about 2 degrees this morning when I went to play tennis.
Wow. To play tennis?
Yeah, I play tennis through the winter with a bunch of guys. It's more a social thing than anything else, and
yeah, it must be hard though, like all that exertion with like this cold, searing air that you're breathing into your lungs.
Oh, it's indoor tennis.
Oh,
Yeah.
I imagined you out there like on a tennis rink next to the hockey pond or something.
No, Jesus, George, I'm not crazy, but
yeah, we had a week like that
play.
too. There was a whole week where the high didn't get above like the mid to low 20s.
Well, we're going to have a great hockey game this afternoon, though.
Good.
The ice. This cold is obviously good for the ice. Although we keep having these storms and all these battalions of men have to go out there with their snow blowers and shovels, while I conveniently have things to do in New York City or elsewhere.
So this is supposed to be this communal thing where you all like take turns doing maintenance, except for you.
Yeah, well, I've done my share, so
Okay.
You can only get away with being a shirker for so long, and then Lars Kulisade, the ultimate enforcer, lets you know that you got to do your share. So.
Okay, that's the scary Swede.
Yes.
Yeah, you've described him before.
Right, he's actually Norwegian, but we call him Swedish just to annoy him.
Yeah, well, it's like that character, and there's that Philip Roth novel, American Pastoral.
Right.
Yeah, and there's the character called the Swede.
Mm-hmm.
That's my absolute favorite Roth novel.
Yeah, well, Lars is he would be a good subject for a novel because he is he's quite a character.
Yeah.
But George.
Yeah.
I think we need a big call out to people in Blogging Heads land on your new blog, which I just saw for the first time. So, what's up with that? I mean, are you finally getting into the Wired era or what?
Oh God, I feel so sheepish about this. I mean, I've had my diatribes about how much I hate the very word blog and how I've been on the internet since before the word blog was invented, hand coding HTML pages, and I still kind of feel that way, but I don't know. Lately, I've succumbed and I'm going to call it a weblog or a web
it's
journal.
Still a blog. Hey, George, come on.
I don't like the
please.
portmanteau, and it just has so many connotations to me. But I'm sure I'll succumb. Okay, probably within the next 30 seconds, I'll be calling my blog a blog. But anyway, it's the title is The Cancer Chronicles, and the subtitle is Notes in Progress by a book. Notes in Progress for a book by George Johnson. So basically, after the week between Christmas and New Year's, that story I wrote on the antiquity of cancer and how far you can trace it back in human history. It finally ran as the cover story for Science Times, which I
love that story, George. Really fascinating.
Thank you. And we talked about that before, and then I thought, well, and I sort of put my old weblog on hold, the Santa Fe Review, in which I was writing about Santa Fe politics and local land use issues, and partly because I've just been overwhelmed by the new book, getting into this whole new subject of the science of cancer. And then I found myself starting to think in terms of these items that would make nice blog posts. So I decided to start this thing and introduce my article that I wrote on the antiquity of cancer, which I guess we talked about that last time. The article hadn't actually appeared, but I was giving a preview because it involved calculating the rough estimate of the number of people who had lived and died on Earth by 1 AD, which turned out to be a surprisingly large number, and then to use that to come up with these rough estimates of whether we really have enough evidence to conclude one way or the other whether cancer was as prevalent as it is today. and with the caveat that you have to adjust for lifespan because people didn't live longer, but take that into account, and is there a core level of cancer that's basically smoldering along in any kind of society of multicellular creatures, which is kind of the view that I lean toward, in that it's very controversial to pick out how much cancer we see today is actually caused by most of the things that people assume, pesticides, industrial chemicals of other kinds, and how much is, even when you adjust for the fact that we live longer, how much is caused by those things, how much is caused by diet and changes in lifestyle, and how much is caused by things that we wouldn't want to give up in a moment, even if it meant we had less cancer. Like, right. For example, women delaying childbirth or postponing it altogether and not being forced to constantly be pregnant, which is pretty well established that by reducing the number of monthly periods a woman has in these estrogen fluxes, which basically hit your cells and cause them to start madly dividing, that that really meant much less cancer in grandmother and great grandmother's age, but then obviously the trade-off is the whole liberation of women to do other things.
Right, and it's not like women are dying at an early age or anything. I mean, the lifespan of women is higher than that of men, and is at an historic high.
Yeah.
So we must be doing something right to offset some of these higher risks.
Well, yeah, and of course, cancer treatment is better than it was.
Is it,
to a great extent. I mean, the diagnosis is better, but of course, as we've talked before, that's a two-sided coin, because a lot of cancers are being diagnosed and caught early and treated that probably wouldn't have required treatment during the lifetime of the patient. Basically, the patient would have way outlived the cancer. But so these are all the kinds of issues that I'm getting into in the book, and I just thought that it's such a lonely endeavor writing a book. It's going to be 2 more years. I've just barely gotten maybe 10,000 good words down, so I thought I'd use this blog to first talk about some of the interesting counterintuitive things I'm finding out about cancer, and also about related things like the fact that there were 50 billion people who had already lived and died on the earth by about 1 AD. And then also just to kind of maybe I thought some people might be interested in the process of writing a book like that, and I might just describe, my progress and my frustrations, and it's something. It'll either, I'll either get into it and it'll take off in the next few months or not. But so I'm considering it an experiment at this point, and I still really have mixed feelings about doing this.
Well, I can tell you that for me, I mean, I've been blogging on and off for about, 5 years now, and blogging for Scientific American since last spring. And it's called blogging, but I think of it as a column. It comes out every week.
Yeah.
And it's, I work on these things and try to make them sort of mini articles. And as you know, I've been picking away at a book on warfare for years, and a lot of my columns end up being about violence, warfare, and so forth, causes of war. And it's writing these blog posts, whatever, has been really helpful to me.
You help clarify your thoughts, I would think.
Yeah. It's sort of,
and you get ideas from other people who comment. And
yes.
Yeah. No, I think that's good.
Yeah, I do too.
And maybe you're slowly even building a following for, when the book comes out.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm building an anti-following. I'm building a readership of people who will buy anything except a book with the name John Horgan on it.
Well, that's a good marketing strategy. But let's see.
I don't know.
Yeah, among my misgivings though this has always been my misgivings about blogging, if you have a really good idea, something that's going to be in your book, it might be this really unique thing that no one's, said quite the way that you're going to say it. Why would you want to give this away up front? I mean, is that going to entice people, or if you hint at it maybe, is that going to entice people later to buy your book, or are you just going to give away all your stuff for free and make the same mistake individually that the newspapers have made in mass? Give away all your material, and I'm certainly not selling advertising.
Well, this was an issue, of course, even if you're selling serial rights. You've got the classic case of people having an article in the New Yorker.
Yeah.
Usually, well before the book comes out, I think at least a month or so. I don't
know. They insist on really long. Yeah, it's not like most serial rights where they come out simultaneously with the book, but way in advance.
And I think that authors would not do that if it wasn't pretty clear that it generates extra interest in the book itself.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how much that's been looked into. I imagine it goes either way, depending on the book.
It doesn't seem to have hurt Malcolm Gladwell.
No, that's true. Yeah, but his books though are more like they're like spin-offs from pieces that he's written. But then he does quite a bit more in the book than he did in, say, the original article or articles.
Yes, although the tipping point, there was a lot of overlap between articles that he had written for the New Yorker and the content in the book. I don't know if there's as much overlap in his subsequent books.
Yeah.
But anyway, George, I think it's a good thing.
Thank you.
And listen, I'm gonna certainly follow your blog just because. You're such a wonderful writer. I'm always curious to see what you're thinking about. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's a lot of work too. That's another part of the trade-off. I mean, should I be spending my time? Like I'll put as much work into a post as I might into like a short article. I mean, I wouldn't write an article that short, so that's not a completely fair comparison. But while I'm confessing that I've done this. I'm going to go on and, I mean, actually, as we both know, in the last few weeks, you and I have each befriended each other on Facebook.
Yes.
And you will note that I'm not using friend as a verb.
Right.
That is where I draw the line. You befriend someone, you make friends with them on Facebook. You do not friend them. That just sends chills up my spine. But, both of us have kind of railed about how much we hated Facebook. And I still hate it. I mean, basically, they've given this whole huge swath of society the idea that Facebook is the internet. So they basically carved off a subset of the internet and addicted all these people to it. So many people, I think, first young people just starting with the internet, and older people who were kind of late adopters, they get sucked into Facebook and they don't realize that this is just basically this commercial operation that's using us all as advertising vehicles.
Right.
By providing, it's a genuine service. But I guess, if I could pay like a monthly fee and not have to have these idiotic advertisements thrown in my face every time I look at someone's page, I'd feel a lot better about it. But, my pages are used to sell advertising. So it's, their computer sees from my description on my Facebook page that I'm a writer. So then it starts putting up all these cheesy ads for, we can help you publish your own book, and all these, like fly-by-night self-publishing kinds of places.
God, George, you're such a wonderful curmudgeon. You know what? I bet
it's just the commercialization of everything. Everything's becoming an advertising vehicle.
George, I bet if you created like an anti-Facebook page on Facebook.
I'm sure there already are. There probably already are such things.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I did have my anti-blog post on my blog.
Right.
But one thing though, on the Cancer Chronicles, I'm running this on my own web server with my own WordPress, and I even adapt my own WordPress theme because I still have this nerdy. I kind of need to get into there and play with the nuts and bolts. And by doing this, there will be no advertisements on it because I just refuse to be an advertising vehicle for some corporation.
It's funny. I just got an email from a a rehab center for drug and alcohol abuse, and they asked if they could run an advertisement next to an article that I'd written about taking peyote. I said, I was tempted to say, how much are you going to pay me? And then I just thought, no, that's just too weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, your article wasn't like the horrible things that happened to you and how you ruined your life and lost your family because you took peyote. It was quite the opposite.
That's true.
I mean, even though, as I recall, it wasn't a great experience because you got really sick, right? This was out on the Navajo reservation.
Yeah, I actually didn't get sick. It was more that my rear end got super sore from sitting on the hard cold ground.
Oh yeah.
For 9 hours.
Like in a Horgan, was it? And yeah.
It was a teepee.
A teepee, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so, sitting cross-legged for 9 hours straight with only one piss break in the middle. Yeah. Oh, my God.
Well, it sounds like a Werner Erhard Est seminar.
Yes. Well, I think it was cooler than that. But,
yeah.
But anyway, I'm with you on that. I signed up for Facebook because actually Scientific American kind of encouraged me to do it. A lot of other professional writers had said you got to do that. It's a way to push the product, and so I have to admit my Facebook presence, such as it is quite mercenary. I just post links to stuff that I've written or links to the chats that we have, and then I look at everybody
last time you
else's
did that, that's when I first started to get it. I said, oh, okay, so this way we can get our friends on Facebook to, maybe tune in and watch Blogging Heads TV, and they might not know to do that otherwise.
Yeah. I don't know if it really makes any difference in terms of traffic, but it's pretty, the effort is minimal. And,
well, I can see how it could take over hours of one's time. I've really jumped in head first, I must admit, because I've been tiptoeing around the edges because a few years ago, some old classmates from when I went to the University of New Mexico and we worked on the daily newspaper, they started a little, just kind of a semi-private page so we could share memories. And they were great memories. We were occupied by like a coalition of 5 different student activist groups because someone misunderstood one of our editorials and you had to publish from a remote location and make all kinds of wonderful, self-righteous comments about freedom of the press. It's a very exciting time. So I definitely wanted to get in on that and see, I got to see an old picture of me with hair down to my shoulder, standing on the mall during, I think, a Vietnam demonstration or something.
Is that on your Facebook page?
Yeah, I posted it recently. See, I've totally gotten into this, and then people liked it. Or I should say they expressed their like for it. Because, like now it's being used as a transitive verb, which isn't good either. But anyway, so I did that.
George, I have to just point something out to you.
What now?
I just have to point out to you, your grouchiness, your curmudgeonliness is exactly what you need for a blog.
Oh.
Now you can just let it flower and express it and let it grow and flourish.
Yeah, I don't know if
let
that's
other people
I don't think that's going to be
by
the tone of the Cancer Chronicles, but I have to admit that I've really, though, just gone whole hog on this. And the next step was everyone, we do this thing called the Santa Fe Science Writing Workshop. Yeah, I have to say, we're pretty proud of this. We're doing our 16th one in May. Wow. Every year we get 45 people. We turn people away. They come to Santa Fe for a week. And as you know, they listen to brilliant science journalists such as John Horgan and other people that we invite to be instructors. And of course they love to do it because we treat our instructors very well and wine them and dine them. And I think it's all, it's a really nice experience. But people just kept telling me, you don't exist unless you're on Facebook. So you have to have a Facebook page for the workshop. So I thought, oh, God, I guess I'll have to do this. And one morning I just bit the bullet. And I just totally, I blew it 3 times. First I decided I didn't want to have it, appended to my own account because I wanted to keep it independent. So I started a new account for the Santa Fe Science Writing Workshop. But then you quickly get into that and you find out that you can't actually do that. It has to be linked to a person. So then they say, who the hell are you? So I fill all this stuff out. And then I've created like a false George Johnson. So there's like two, there's many George Johnsons on Facebook, but now there's two of me. Mm-hmm. And the one I've just created, hasn't a friend in the world, and it was kind of embarrassing. And then I just realized I should ask first I sent an email out to a bunch of people, including you, saying, hey, come look at our new Facebook page. And then I realized I'd done it wrong, so I just evaporated the whole thing, canceled the account. And then I thought, well, I guess what I need to do is start a Facebook group on my page. And I did that and sent out invitations. And you posted some nice things. And then someone told me that was actually wrong, and I needed to start a page that comes off my website. So I finally got it down.
Yeah.
And the great thing is in doing that, all these people have flocked to the page, and I've realized that almost every single person I've known professionally, going back for years and years at the New York Times, Scientific American, and the book world, every damn one of these people is on Facebook.
Yeah.
And so I'm befriending them, they're befriending me, and I've built this network, and I'm going to be interested to see if that turns out to be a good thing.
Well, I'm sure it'll be a good thing to market the workshop, although I don't know if you need it.
Yeah, that's the thing. We got by, and again, it's just my old, the internet, was ruined in by 1998 is kind of my mentality, because it was all people hand coding pages. It was non-commercial, no video, but and we did fine, just with that. We still have this really pretty funky web page, but I'm probably going to move that over to the WordPress platform, and I don't know, it's taking up too much of my time when I should be working on my book.
Well, listen, I think probably the best consequence of creating that page for the workshop is for the people who've been there to network with each other about jobs and ideas for freelancing and that sort of thing. Because it sounds like you really don't need it, but they do in this climate.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping, and so far I'm not sure how that works, but I'm trying to get people to, can somebody, once they express their like for the page, it seems like, I think they can post things. Mm-hmm. And so that would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm hoping because this actually started when last year's, the class of 2010 independently started their own Facebook page for that workshop. Mm-hmm. And, and we're using it just for that, to keep in touch with each other, and I tune in sometimes, and it's really nice. So maybe this will become that.
Yeah, George, and if you're really feeling ambitious and generous, you can mediate dialogues about the future of science journalism.
Yeah, wow. Well, there's another real time sink, because it's not clear to me now if I'm going to have to, moderate, just to keep spam off the forums, what's to keep somebody from liking the page and then posting lots of junk. There's probably all kinds of ways this has been done, and people who are listening to this will know how it's done. But
well, you have to approve people.
Oh God, yeah. And
you have to approve people as friends.
Yeah, and the number of Santa Fe Santa Fe Science Writing Workshop alumni is 45. It's like 700, 800.
Wow.
Yeah. Is that right? Wait.
Are there that many science journalists in the world?
15 times 45 equals 675.
Jesus. Poor things.
We hear from a lot of them that, they are. They've carved out these, amazing niches in the journalism world, ranging from, there was one woman early on who went on to produce science films at WGBH, and some freelancers who've just got this great business where, they have like 5 or 6 really good clients, and then, they've and then expand into doing books. So, quite a few people do, and some people just kind of go back to their jobs like, like public information officers at universities, in charge of publicizing the science, and they use it to kind of, give themselves a better idea of, what a good story really is, as opposed to maybe, what your bosses think it is, and some of them, want to, strike out later. When we get an amazing number of scientists, I'd say 2/3 of the workshop in a typical year will be postdocs, often in their late 20s and early 30s, who've just, usually in the biological sciences, and they're just fascinated by the science, and decided that they do not want to do bench science.
Right.
And maybe they want to write about it, so they're just kind of exploring this possibility. And some of them, turn out to be, really talented writers, and hopefully get a little boost out of this.
Well, I think it's clear. We've certainly talked about this before, that given the financial problems in media these days, and especially in science journalism, that you're probably going to have a bigger proportion of writers who have other jobs, and primarily are scientists or engineers or doctors or whatever. That's true with some people in this, or their one spouse in a 2-income relationship. Like one of my best friends, Christy Ashwanden, who was at our very, very first workshop back when Timothy Ferris was one of the instructors. The first thing he did when he arrived in Santa Fe was he asked me to take him to a liquor store so we could buy a case of beer for his students, so they would have beer during their meetings. And so Ferris was great, and Christy, she had just, I think she graduated from the University of Colorado with a science degree, and then really wanted to be a science writer, and then she went from the workshop kind of inspired her, and she went to that program at the University of Santa Cruz for, which only accepts people with science degrees for a non-degree science writing year, and from then, now it's amazing. She and her husband Dave are living on this farm in western Colorado, growing not just their own vegetables, but their own chicken, and have this very self-sufficient life on this farm. And at the same time, she's carved out this really, really nice freelancing business, and is starting to work on her first book. Oh my God, that sounds like the ideal hippie life.
Oh yeah, except they're not hippies, but all the good things about that. And, yeah, and then there's another one just a town over, Michelle Nyhouse, who's done the same thing, and she just got an Alicia Patterson Fellowship for what will probably become her first book. So it's really nice to see that you can still do it even in this economy.
Yes, good to hear.
Yeah. So you're talking about your own blog, and how you've been kind of using it to hit on one of your favorite themes, which is warfare and violence, and whether it really is endemic, as most people seem to either believe or want to believe. And I was really struck by your recent column. I mean, you were kind of on this Arizona shooting really quickly, and said some interesting things, and repeated your strong support for gun control.
Well, I kind of crashed this thing in, even though my piece is a blog, it's actually edited and even copy edited before it's published, and usually there's some time for me to work on it, but I had just finished submitting one blog post, and then the Arizona shootings broke, and I decided to crash something in. And I'll be honest, George, I felt a little bad when Obama gave his speech on the need for civility and finding common ground here in America, because my piece was not very civil. These kinds of shootings, really, they drive me crazy. And the idea that here you have a person who obviously was mentally ill, who was able to get a semi-automatic pistol with a clip with, I guess it was 33 bullets in it, which is now perfectly legal, and it's also legal in Arizona to carry a concealed weapon.
Yeah.
This guy
Same here in my state, in New Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, it infuriates me. And of course, you and I talked about these issues back in it's almost 4 years ago now.
Is that when the Virginia Tech?
When the Virginia Tech shootings were in the spring of 2007.
God,
and
I can't believe it was
and
that
I
long
remember
ago.
that some people seriously were proposing that there should have been, if more of the students and faculty at Virginia Tech had been carrying guns, and they could have shot this guy.
Yeah, you got really mad about that, because I think, what didn't Mickey Koss make that point, or I don't know if he was serious, but...
I don't either, but I've seen the same points made seriously in the blogosphere. In this case
just right immediately after the Arizona shooting.
Right.
Well, yeah. Oh, but did you see that? You actually sent this to me. There was that piece on Slate. I think it was William Salatin.
Right.
And he was like reciting that famous old argument that, well, if more people had guns, they could have subdued this maniac and saved the Congresswoman. And he was pointing out that there was this guy. I think he was like in a drugstore across the street.
That's
and
right.
He heard what was going on. He came out with his gun, which he conveniently had concealed, in case he needed to, kill somebody while he was in the drugstore, buying cigarettes or something. And he comes out, and it sounds like he almost shot someone who turned out to be someone who wrestled the gun away from the assailant.
Exactly. I mean,
so quick timing. Oh, I'm going to be a hero. I have a gun here. He could have shot this innocent person.
And he had no training. He could buy this gun, but he had no training in the armed services. He wasn't a policeman, and so I thought that was really an effective piece in pointing out that the more people you have with guns, the more potential you have for friendly fire, accidental shootings, all that sort of thing. The piece that I wrote was, I admit, pretty. I used a lot of inflammatory rhetoric. I called the National Rifle Association despicable. I referred to gun nuts. I mentioned this arms dealer that I sat next to on a flight out to Utah, actually going to a conference on the on the evolution of aggression, who was a total sociopath and was gloating about selling weapons to mobsters and really bad people and fantasizing about a race war in Southwest United States that would generate more gun sales for him. Now, since writing this piece,
that's way out on the fringe.
It is, but when even some of the rhetoric of people who have commented on my blog posts, they're so crazy. They're bragging about having dozens of guns and assault rifles and so forth to protect themselves. Just a couple of points. One of the things that I pointed out in this piece that I haven't seen much of in the commentary on the Arizona shootings, and I think is an important point, is how our lack of gun control in the United States affects other countries. The United States is by far the world's biggest supplier of small arms, of rifles, pistols, all these sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, just as far as fueling the Mexican drug wars.
That's right. There was a great article in the Washington Post that came out just in December about how, I mean, I didn't realize there have been 30,000 people killed in the drug wars in Mexico in the last 4 years. It's just a phenomenal rate of carnage, and the guns that are being used are primarily from the United States, primarily from Texas, and Arizona, California also to an extent. And so Mexico actually has very strict gun laws, but they're bypassed by all these drug dealers who just import them from the United States.
Yeah, we want the drugs, and we want to sell them the guns. So and the majority of the people who are really suffering from this are citizens of Mexico that live in these, the northern parts of these northern states.
And the hypocrisy is just beyond belief that we are leaning on Mexico and Colombia and the other countries who are the source of drugs for this country, marijuana, cocaine, and so forth. We're leaning on them to try to stop the flow of drugs, and at the same time, we're doing nothing to prevent the flow of firearms to these countries and all these other unstable countries around the world, Afghanistan and Central Africa and so forth.
Yeah. Well, it's not that they're doing nothing, but it hasn't been so effective. I mean, one thing that surprised me, and I think I talked about this when it happened, but a couple years ago when I drove down into Mexico for the first time in quite a while, and the typical thing is, you drive right into Mexico, and they just kind of wave you through, and if you want to go more than 30 miles, you have to get a visa, which is pretty easy to do. And then coming back, it's this huge ordeal getting through U.S. Customs. Mm-hmm. So now there's U.S. Customs, and it took a long time to get through U.S. Customs to leave the United States and go into Mexico, because they were really grilling you and looking, for weapons smugglers into Mexico. So this was, part of some quid pro quo where, Mexico's saying, look, if you're going to expect us to, be really serious about interdicting drugs flowing out, you've got to be, do the same with weapons going in.
Right. It's, as I said, I get crazy on this. There's one other point I want to make. Then I want to show that I at least recognize the complexity of the association between gun availability and lethal violence. So, first of all, the Brady Center is a pretty good source of information on the risks of gun availability, and they point out, and I have this in my blog post, that so the gun supporters say we need these guns for self-defense. The NRA doesn't even talk about hunting anymore. It's all about self-defense, because if it was all about hunting, you wouldn't be talking about semi-automatic pistols with clips of 33 bullets.
Yeah, right.
They say it's because we want to protect ourselves in our homes, because there are outlaws out there that have these guns. But I'm sure you know that you're just so much more likely, if you have a gun in your house, to have an unintentional shooting, a homicide, or a suicide than you are to protect yourself from a bad guy.
Yeah, it's certainly what you hear.
From the outside.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But now going to the other side. This comes from a New York Times article. There was actually a Supreme Court case in 2008 about the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms and so forth. And there was a really good piece by Adam Liptak pointing out that, and this is something that the NRA and the other gun supporters trot out, that there is not a good correlation between gun control and suppression of violent crime and homicide.
Okay.
So as one example, Washington, D.C. passed a very strict gun control measure in 1976, and then homicides.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I've read that. Yeah.
Went up after that period.
So how do you counter that argument?
Well, I'd counter it by saying that in the 1980s, that's when you had the crack epidemic in this country. There were also certain demographic factors. You had a big surge in the population of adolescent males, particularly in urban areas, and when you're talking about something as complicated as crime, homicide, and so forth, we're in the realm of social science, and there's so many different variables.
Yeah.
But they're absolutely right. The NRA and people like that the correlation between gun controls and lower homicide is not clear cut at the very least.
Well, you can see in the Washington case, because it's not like Washington's this insular society that's surrounded by big walls, and it's easy enough to bring in guns from surrounding states, right?
Well, that's right. So the case is, if you outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns.
Right.
That actually
famous,
is true. I mean,
the famous bumper
Mexico,
sticker. Yeah.
it's sort of a small example of what's going on in Mexico, which outlawed guns, but then the bad guys just import them from the United States.
Yeah.
If
So
you
you
look
can't
at
just
the,
outlaw them one place and then let them flourish elsewhere. It's just gonna.
That's right. If you look
So
at
what do you do?
if you look at the world, also, there's a very complicated correlation between gun ownership and gun-related violence. So by far, the United States, there are somewhere between 600 and 700 million small arms in the world right now, according to some of these nonprofits that track these sorts of things. About half of those guns are in the United States.
Okay.
So the United States now, there's roughly one gun per person in this country.
Yeah.
And yet we don't
Hey,
have
where's
the
yours?
highest. Pardon me?
Where's your gun?
I'm a real. I don't. Guns really make me nervous.
Yeah, I don't have one either. So I guess that means there's someone else who has like two for each person like us. Or
Oh, geez, like I said, the people who are commenting on my blog post are telling me what an idiot I am. Some of them are bragging that they have 20 or 30 guns.
yeah.
I
It's
just
certainly
want to
true,
point out
though, that most people, I mean, there's huge numbers of people who just collect guns. It's a hobby, the same way that I collect old 1920s radios. They keep them locked up. They're very careful with them. They would never be used for a crime, and it's, they keep them, very careful to keep them from being stolen in a burglary. One, out of a sense of responsibility, so they aren't used that way, and also because, they don't want to lose them because they're these valued possessions. So those are the people you hear from that, resent any infringement on their sacred Second Amendment rights, and yet, they're obviously not the problem.
Right. Well,
So how do you do that?
Well, I just want to make the point about the relationship between gun ownership and firearm-related deaths. That the relationship is complicated. If you're looking at developed, industrialized nations, Western Europe, Japan, those sorts of things, the United States is in a class by itself. It's got by far the highest rate of firearm-related deaths, and by far the highest rate of firearm ownership. But then you've got other countries like Colombia has a firearm death rate almost 10 times that of the United States, whereas gun ownership is only about 1/10 as much. Russia has a much lower rate of gun ownership, much higher rate of firearm-related deaths. The same is true of Guatemala. So obviously, there's some countries where you've got gang-related violence, you've got problems with law and order, you've got a lot of civil instability, and very high rates of crime, violent crime, and homicide. Basically because the bad guys have the gun. Again, that's a case of if you outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns.
Right.
But if you look at countries that are kind of the same, then you can see that the correlation between restrictions on gun ownership and low homicide rates are that they're pretty closely correlated. Just one weird outlier. You probably know this, that Switzerland has the third highest rate of gun ownership in the world. So you've got the United States is by far the highest.
Yeah.
Yemen is second.
What's second?
Yemen is a real. And Yemen also has pretty high rates of firearm-related death. Switzerland is third, basically because most males after a certain point are they're part of a national militia who are required to have a gun. I think it's a semi-automatic rifle of some kind in your house, and you also get training in using it. But the rate of homicide in Switzerland is very, very low.
Yeah.
So it's complicated, but I just feel
so it's not just the guns, obviously, but
right. Here's one other factoid I'll throw at people out there that I find really interesting, and this actually came from that conference on aggression that I was going to back in 2008 when I met that crazy arms dealer. There are two evolutionary psychologists named Martin Daly and Margot Wilson, and they are experts in applying Darwinian theory to an understanding of homicide. They wrote this classic book that came out in the late 80s called Homicide, that's cited by Steve Pinker and other evolutionary psychologists. And they gave a talk at this conference on the correlation between homicide rates and what they called economic inequality. And they said if you have a simple model that's just looking for a correlation between poverty and homicide, especially armed robberies and so forth that lead to killings, the correlation is very poor. But they looked then at counties and provinces, states within the United States and in Canada, and they found a very strong correlation between economic inequality, meaning a big division between the poorest people and the wealthiest people in one given area, and the homicide rate.
Yeah.
And the implication of that, George, and this is even stronger than gun ownership, the implication is that we need more socialism to drive down the homicide rates.
That's going to be easy to sell.
Yeah. So
just imagine if Obama had responded to this tragedy in Arizona by going there and saying, don't you people see finally that we've really got to have gun control in the country? And of course, he can't possibly say that. It's not even on the table anymore. And then if he'd said, yes, we need more government programs to address inequalities between the rich and the poor. And
can you imagine?
All these issues are just off the table because the whole political, arena has just been dominated by reacting to right-wing lunacy.
Yeah,
it's just so depressing.
In my piece, I cited an article that was published in something called the Washington Independent. I'm not even sure what that is, but it was a nice piece, basically saying that gun rights have thrived under Barack Obama, and some of the gun control groups are very upset at his behavior. The Brady Center, which is a very hardcore gun control outfit, gave Obama an F after his first year in office for his performance on gun control issues. But Obama had made it very clear during his election campaign that he was not going to try to pass stronger gun control measures.
No, it's politically impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how Clinton was on that issue. If he basically also was hands off that
he kind
issue.
of catered to, you go out and put on a hunting suit and go out with the, you have to show you're a real man, Al Gore. And in my own state here in New Mexico, our own little mini version of that was liberal Democratic Governor Bill Richardson, who just totally kowtowed to the NRA, and we got, the concealed and carry law passed, and then with some restrictions, and one was that you can have a concealed weapon, and hide it on your person anywhere you go, except in a bar. You have to lay down your arms, like in the old Wild West saloons, but then the gun control people were just really upset about that because it also applied to restaurants that served alcohol. So now they changed the law. So if you go into something that you can call a restaurant because it has some threshold amount of food service, then you can keep your gun on your side, unless in case there's like a dispute over the tip or something. And just after this happened, it's a totally bogus argument. People don't come to restaurants to drink, so it's not going to be a threat. But just right after this, it's not directly related, but there were these two people that went to a local restaurant in Santa Fe, the Zia Diner. I think maybe you and Valerie went there when you visited Santa Fe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's this nice kind of trendy restaurant. I think it was the Zia. And I might be wrong now that I think about it, but that kind of restaurant, and it was just a restaurant, and these two guys came in, and you read the stories later. First they each had like 2 or 3 beers, followed by a Boilermaker, and they're supposed to order food, and then they just order like a side of French fries or something. And then finally they told them, they'd have to leave because this wasn't a drinking establishment. By this time they're just so completely wiped out on alcohol that they end up running down this family that's returning from graduation ceremonies at the Santa Fe Indian School, and kills these young people.
Oh, God.
And so it's obviously, didn't have a gun in this case, but just that ridiculous distinction between, it's safe for people to have guns in restaurants because people don't get drunk there. It's just, any excuse they can, have to eat away or undermine, even the most mild restrictions. It's just...
It's, and I'm sure you've read that there is a surge in sales of these high-capacity clips now after this shooting, because this happens every time, because the gun lovers think that there might be restrictions now, even though there clearly won't be. But just to be sure, they go
better
out,
stock
run
up
out.
on. They're trying to take our guns away. It's all part of this Obama plot, which obviously it isn't. I mean, whatever his plot is, it's not including confiscation of weapons, or even the mildest kind of controls.
I just to sort of broaden the scope of this discussion, I want to let you know about a book that I just read that I've been meaning to read for quite a while. I'm holding it up now. It's called War by Sebastian Junger. He's this very adventurous, very talented journalist. He wrote The Perfect Storm. He's written a bunch of things since then. And War is about a period he spent, I think it was almost a year on and off, with a group of men in one of the most dangerous outposts in Afghanistan. It was called the Strippo Outpost, after one guy in the army who was killed there. Mm-hmm. And Junger is just hanging out with these young men and trying to understand what they're doing there and how they view this terrible conflict that they're in, and this state of being at risk of dying any instant. I mean, you've got hostile people surrounding this place in the mountains of Afghanistan, and there could be a sniper bullet that just bumps you off any instant, or a mortar round or whatever. And I'm really impressed with this book. I'm impressed with Junger's physical courage, first of all, because he himself is in harm's way many times. What bothers me, though, is that he invokes some science that I've also written about, coming from people like Richard Wrangham, the anthropologist at Harvard, who studied chimpanzees, and says that chimpanzees and human males, share this affinity for lethal violence. He also cites the work of anthropologists who say that there's evidence of war going back as far as we can see into human prehistory.
Yeah, all things that you've argued aren't really established at all.
They're not established at all.
Yeah,
and he also has this passage that it upsets me. He says, but it's very well written. Let me just read a section. I'll see if you have any response. War is a lot of things, and it's useless to pretend that exciting isn't one of them. It's insanely exciting. The machinery of war and the sound it makes and the urgency of its use and the consequences of almost everything about it are the most exciting things anyone engaged in war will ever know. And then he goes on to say that soldiers all know this. That one of the cliche about soldiers not talking about their time in combat is that it was so disturbing and traumatic that they don't want to recall it.
Right.
But he's saying, and there are other writers who have said this as well, that the main reason is because they like it so much, and they don't want anybody to know how much they enjoy war and how much even they enjoy killing people.
Yeah. I don't know.
What, you find that?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I think he could be true in one way and not in the other. I mean, people, could just be, just feel horrible about the fact they were in a position where they had to kill people. They could have been terrified as much as they were excited. And then when it's all over, you think back, and maybe you're feeling kind of proud of yourself because you were able to endure this, and that you were able to kill when necessary, even though you feel really horrible about it when you think about it on a more personal level. I mean, I could see that it'd be more subtle than people just gloating about it. I mean, there's certainly people who do, but I mean, it was certainly a formative experience for anyone, and it's just to be put under that kind of pressure and to be able to perform and come out alive the other end, having accomplished, for better or worse, what you're expected to accomplish. You can see why people, could feel a certain pride in themselves.
Absolutely.
For doing that without, being, it's not because people really just want to get out there and kill. It's, I don't think it's.
Well, the thing is, I think there, I've talked before about how there are studies that have isolated people who have psychopathic tendencies who actually enjoy combat and enjoy killing for its own sake. But then war also obviously has a profound effect on people, and once you start fighting, you see your buddies massacred by the other side, and then you often become consumed with hatred. This was well established in World War II, and you get escalating atrocities on both sides. The My Lai
it just
massacre
takes on its own internal logic and.
Right.
Well, not really logic. I mean, it's just very basic, and you're going to be supporting the people in your group.
Right.
Something to do with oxytocin, right? There was that article by Nicholas Wade in the Times.
Yeah.
That's too abrupt a transition, but.
This is obviously one of my pet peeves. Let me just say that I urge people to read Younger's book. I think it's really an amazing piece of reporting. But I would just urge them to
remember the bonobos.
Yeah, remember the bonobos. React skeptically when you get to the science that supposedly provides a context for understanding these extremely aggressive young warriors who are fighting this battle in Afghanistan. As far as other science goes.
Yeah, I'm saying, speaking of the bonobos, you had sent me. Well, first I wanted to mention, I just got this. I'm on this listserv with some science writer friends.
Yeah.
And my friend Douglas Fox, who's a really good freelancer out of San Francisco, who recently wrote just a really excellent, it's just the most comprehensive overall piece on alternative energy and why it's not so simple as either side says, for the Christian Science Monitor. And then he was asked to do this. Anyway, he spun off this really interesting piece for Wired, again off the Arizona shooting, and the headline is Secret Service Study Probes the Psyche of U.S. Assassins. And it's actually got this wonderful picture at the top that, I don't know where it came from, but it's a picture of John Wilkes Booth, Lincoln's assassin, with like the devil looking over his shoulder and kind of, urging him to do bad. But it's just kind of this wonderful image. But anyway, he refers to something called the Exceptional Case Study Project, which was conducted by the Secret Service, and it involved all this sociological research on political assassins, and then trying to find out, what, if anything, they had in common. And then if you go over and look at the, you can actually go over, then they have a whole website, the Secret Service, and they post these papers. So this appeared in some journal, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, official publication, and it was called Assassination in the United States, an Operational Study of Recent Assassins, Attackers, and Near-Lethal Approachers. Near-Lethal Approachers. It has its own jargon. And there were two things that really stood out to me. One, in the abstract, after studying these, it was 83 persons known to have attacked or approached to attack a prominent public figure official in the United States since 1949. And one of the things they concluded, which I thought was interesting, was in every case, let's see, questions were examined about each person's movement, and whether they were mentally ill. In every case, the attack or near attack was the end result of an understandable and often discernible process of thinking and action. So implications for protectors, investigators, and researchers are discussed. So in other words, they weren't like these crazed maniacs, but this was, they had been deliberately plotting this, which isn't too much of a surprise, I guess.
Right. Well, to attack one of these public figures, I think, normally there is some security there that you have to get past. And so, yeah, I mean, even Sirhan or certainly Oswald, and I mean... Yeah, I mean,
obviously very, planned and plotted and alternative.
Right. And even in the case of this guy, Loughner, who is clearly deranged, he seems to have been capable of a fairly logical plan.
Yeah.
So
it makes it scarier in a way.
Right.
I mean, this was another line from the paper that I was actually looking for before. It says, the reality of American assassination is much more mundane, more banal than assassinations depicted on the screen. Neither monsters nor martyrs, recent American assassins, attackers, and near-lethal approachers engaged in pre-incident patterns of thinking and behavior. Understanding these patterns of ideation and action may permit those with protective responsibilities to prevent future attacks. I mean, of course, there's something very self-serving about this. This is the Secret Service, and they obviously want to make the case for there being a Secret Service and to, scope these people out in advance. And, I guess if they get, if the president or someone gets a threatening letter in the mail and it's kind of, ambiguous as to whether it's really a threat, they actually... FBI agents might show up at the person's house and then they sit down and interview them.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. They almost act like psychotherapists with the person.
Right, and then some become friends. And I think that was in Doug Fox's story. And then later they say, oh, you're the best friend person who's ever tried to understand me. And
yeah, and if they don't seem to change their minds, then they'll be locked up.
Yeah,
but they kind of give them the opportunity to talk it out and change their minds, I guess, or the agents find out if it's serious or not. I don't know. I think we will always have this kind of derangement. I mean, there have been assassins going back as far and obvious lethal violence going back, at least on an interpersonal level, as far as we can see.
Yeah.
As opposed to organized warfare and so forth. And we've always got to be prepared for this. It would just be nice if we could make it more difficult for these people to get the kind of weapon where you can potentially
that's
shoot
the argument.
dozens of people.
Well, how about this whole other issue that really came up via Sarah Palin, the idea if it's really fair to blame the political climate and political rhetoric for something like this assassination or attempted so far assassination.
I didn't even want to get into that because to me it's so similar to the argument that
TV and violence.
Right, that video games, or remember when it was violent rock and roll?
Yeah, boy.
That supposedly inspired
that was nothing
kids.
Compared to Grand Theft Auto.
Right.
I personally, I think we've talked about this before, but it just, on a gut level, it just seems obvious to me that anything like Grand Theft Auto or particularly violent movies and shows again and again on TV, because the one argument is that it's a catharsis. People watch this and it gets kind of their natural aggressive tendencies, plays them out in their mind and not in reality. But on the other hand, anything like that kind of creates a space in reality where things become thinkable or possible for someone, and especially if someone maybe, have some sort of mental imbalance in another way. So,
well, here's the thing, George.
I just go back and forth.
Over the last 20 years, the consumption of violent video games, violent videos that you can find on the internet and so forth, the violence of television shows and movies has just gone up. And in that period in the United States, I'm not sure about globally, but in the United States, which still has a very high rate of violent crime, that rate has gone way down.
Yeah, but so many variables there, you can't really... There's too many variables, don't you think, to untangle?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is you know, I've also written about the link between violent sports and war, and you've got theorists who say that violent sports provide a cathartic effect that make war less likely, or it goes the other way, that they reinforce the aggressive impulse.
Yeah.
You know, you can, depending on what society you look at a given particular time, you can prove anything you like.
Right.
It's social science.
Yeah. Well, that kind of
social science.
You know what? One of the things that we were going to talk about is Scientific American put up this whole special page. How can science help make sense of the Arizona massacre? You know, you read through this package of articles, and the answer is basically, well, it can't, because you know, there's just too many ambiguities, and there were some good things in here, you know. So I don't mean to imply otherwise, and you know, like the it's interesting, this whole how weak the link is between mental illness and violent crime, for example.
Right.
That was actually a piece in Slate, come to think of it. But I think someone else made a similar point in the SciAm package. And then there was this, what seemed like just the most ridiculous subject of an article for this page, but it turned out to actually have some insight. It's called, Could Chess Boxing Diffuse Aggression in Arizona and Beyond? And I had heard vaguely about chess boxing. Do you know about this?
I kind of skimmed that piece. It's where you alternate between playing a chess match, and then you get up and you duke it out with the guy you're playing chess with?
Yeah, so you're going mano with someone over the chessboard in a high-speed chess game, you know, like one of these aggressive things like you see in Washington Square Park in New York, I guess. And then, you know, I don't know what happens if the bell goes off or what, but then you get up and then you just start punching the hell out of each other, you know, and then you win either through a checkmate or a knockout.
Right.
And it's so funny how, you know, someone mentioned this in passing at a New Year's Eve party I went to, and I thought, this is just the most bizarre, fringy thing I've ever heard. And then, you know, a few weeks later, you have an article in Scientific American, and their argument is that it teaches people to control their aggression and control their emotions, and that the single most important thing, you know, is probably, you know, just that, just having this ability to control your emotions, and it's more important than your intelligence. It's more important than maybe whether you're slightly deranged in certain ways. If you can learn to control your emotions, it's an obvious thing that this is, you know, paramount to avoiding things like the Arizona shootings.
Yeah.
And supposedly chess boxing. I mean, that's kind of gimmicky as a way to do that. This idea that you're alternating between intellectual aggression and physical aggression somehow.
I think of hockey as a kind of chess boxing.
Yeah, where's the chess come in?
Well,
the strategy.
It's a game that requires great skill, and you got to be looking around for people to pass to. You have to be very cool and rational, even as you are like smacking into people and racing around the ice causing mayhem.
Yeah. I mean, I bet people say that about boxing, that there's a huge amount of intellectual strategy in it. You know, people who glorified it, like Norman Mailer and Joyce Carol Oates. And
the sweet science.
Yeah.
Hey, George, you know, we're at an hour and 9 minutes.
Yikes. We did it again. God, just get carried away. It's just
I just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, no, good. Yeah, I've said too much, I know.
No. But I do have to. I have to get ready to go play some hockey.
Oh, okay. Well, let's link to this stuff. And there's also some other things in the SciAm package, and some of it just seemed kind of, I don't know. It sort of bothered me in its obligatory nature, like the chances of recovering from brain trauma. Past cases show why millimeters matter. So, just all this stuff that, again, I'm hearing it on NPR too. We are interviewing someone who 20 years ago was shot in the head with a bullet and survived, and, what's it like, and just the intensity, of every little spin-off that can be exploited, not just on this story, but, everything that comes across just really kind of struck me as being a little weird. Horrible tragedy that's, obviously should had journalists trying to understand it from every angle, but at some point it almost, seems just to become kind of show-offy. Like how many science angles can we come up with for the shooting, including chess boxing?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said it.
I probably wish that I hadn't. It's just my mood today. That was great, John, talking to you.
Yeah, same here, George. Keep up that blog. I'll be checking it out.
I will try. I have my first post. I think you're the first person and possibly the only person who's read the post, because I haven't made any attempt to draw people's attention to it. But, by God, I'm going to post on Facebook.
Well, hey, listen, no, you have that link on Blogging Heads, and you'll get a flood of...
And I'll have the link on Blogging Heads, and, and then maybe, you can someone will blog the blog, and I'm drawing the line at tweeting, though, or twittering. Are you doing that?
I'm not doing that.
Okay,
I
good.
draw the line there also.
Okay, I won't if you won't. But if either of us changes his mind, they have to tell the other first, okay?
Okay, it's a deal.
Okay, John, you have a good time hockeying.
All right, take it easy.
See you soon.